Welcome to Get Savvy, the podcast for people who want to claim back their time through the power of delegation, streamlining, and productivity. I'm your host, Teesha, and today I have a special guest here with me, Jules from JHA Consulting and Humans at Work. Jules is originally from the UK and has now lived in New Zealand for almost 18 years. She is also the founder of two businesses, the ones that I just mentioned. Humans at Work is globally focused, featuring podcasts with international guests, blogs, and online learning courses. The intent is to inspire her audience with stories and ideas that celebrate diversity, moral courage, and the unique humanity in all of its forms. In her other business, Jules and her team provide strategy, design, and change management consulting services using nature-based models to support organizations to be more sustainable and impactful. So thank you for being here today, Jules. It's very exciting to have you here.
You're welcome. I'm finding it very interesting to be on the other side of the microphone.
Yes, and we'll definitely get you to tell our listeners a little bit more about your podcast as well. Would you like to actually start us off by giving us a bit of an overview of what JHA is? I know I've very, very briefly mentioned it, but yeah, could you tell us a little bit about it and its mission?
Yeah, so JHA Consulting is a management consulting company with a difference. We call it a boutique consulting company, which means basically it means it's small. But I guess we've got a couple of things that are different about us compared to what people might understand from sort of some of the bigger or more well-known management consulting companies. The first is that we use nature-based models as much as possible to bring a different perspective into how organizations and leaders think about their work and think about strategy and the future. And part of that is driven by our ethos to help organizations become truly sustainable and to amp up their work in kind of regenerating the climate and, the planet, biodiversity, all of those things. And I guess the other difference is that we would say we are very bespoke, which means that we have, a whole lot of experience amongst the team of different models or processes or things that have worked before. But we try and look at each situation, each client as unique and think about what's going to work for them. And so that involves a little bit more creativity, a little bit more innovation. But what it means is that the client, the organization, the leader, whoever it is, they get exactly what they need and not what they don't need. And so those are our two sort of founding ethoses. I don't know how you'd say that actually. Principles of our ethos.
Yeah, that's really great. So you're not applying this blanket approach to every single client that walks in the door.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's some pros and cons in that, in the sense that I would say it's harder work for us.
Yeah.
A lot of the companies, particularly the global ones, they bring a 20-year library of models, that they sort of bring in and they say, here's a model, here's where it's worked, adopt it. Whereas we don't do that. We have to be on the spot and be really understanding the situation and what is required. And then we mix and match things that we might have done before, but we always try and make sure that it's going to be very specific to that client and that context and what they want to achieve. So harder work, but better outcome.
And I'm sure that's really rewarding for you guys as well, because you know that you're making a really meaningful difference to each of those people, because it's not just cookie cutter.
Absolutely. And, we put a lot of store in trust and relationships. And so, even as a consultant, quite often you have to deliver news that doesn't go down very well, your idea isn't going to fly, or, there are some things about your organization or your strategy that you need to fundamentally change. Whole lot of stuff that is quite difficult sometimes to deliver, and it's also quite difficult to hear. And so we spend a lot of time making sure that our clients understand who we are as people and build that trust
Yeah.
that we will do right by them.
Yeah.
And we're alongside them as kind of like a critical friend. We're not going to leave them in the lurch. We're not going to, we're not going to just disappear off. But equally, we don't want them to be reliant on us. So we're trying to build that relationship where we can say, it's time for you to go off on your own. You don't need us anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And so many consultants or coaches out there wouldn't be doing that. And yeah, half of them as well, probably just yes men. And they are just saying that, oh, yeah, that's a great idea, and let them go off and do it.
Absolutely. And, it's really challenging as an individual. Not many people are happy to go into a challenging conversation
No.
and say no, or, constructively criticize. And I would say that's not my natural personality either. But to let people go along thinking that something is all fine is kind of a dereliction of duty. And so if you've built that trust, people know who you are, you know who they are, you're able to approach those conversations in a very constructive way. This isn't working, but let's work together on how it might do. Or this isn't appropriate. Sometimes you have to call people on their behavior. That's never a pleasant task for anybody. Any leader would know that.
Yeah.
So we have to work hard at having the confidence and the trust to be able to have that really candid relationship with our clients.
Yeah.
But the value of that is that, a lot of them we're still in touch with long after we've stopped providing services, having a coffee, or even just having a Teams call or a phone call or a quick text, just to kind of check in with them, and vice versa. So that's kind of part of the long-term value, is you're creating this network of relationships which are on just for themselves, they're worth it. Even if they don't bring work or clients, actually having a network of people you can test ideas with, or just socialize with, having a coffee and having a professional conversation is just really valuable.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, you've obviously built those relationships really strong. And although some of those conversations may initially be uncomfortable where you're telling them no, then it will pay off for them in the long run, because, you're not putting them into a situation where they're going to underperform or, with bad ideas. So
yeah, and people don't normally come to consulting companies unless they know that they've got some kind of challenge.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's that they've got a brand new opportunity and they don't know where to start, but a lot of times is that they know that something's wrong, they know that they need to change something, and they need some help and some guidance. So they already know some of that. They might not know the full reality of it, or the diagnosis that they have worked through might be sort of biased from their perspective. But they're coming to you for help, and that's a step of trust. And so we take that very seriously. It's not a transaction for us.
Yeah.
You're inviting us into your organization. We're going to live up to that expression of trust, even if sometimes that means us saying we're not the right company for you. Either what you want to do, we're not the best placed company to do it, and we'll refer on to people that we trust and we value, who have different skill sets. Or what you want to do is not something that we agree with in terms of our ethics. And so we're happy to talk to you about why, but if you still want to continue down that track, then maybe do it with somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so important. So what inspired you to start JHA Consulting? Was it something from your personal history? Was it that you saw a need for it in the industry? How did it come about?
Probably all of those things, actually. I mean, I have been a consultant before in the UK. I was a lone wolf, like a lone consultant.
Yeah.
And I did really enjoy it, actually. When I came to New Zealand, I felt it was really important to become part of the community and part of that was getting jobs in organizations where you learn how things work, you get to know different people, you understand a bit more about the landscape. And I really enjoyed that. But there came a point when I had just finished a really intense program of work where I it's fair to say I was burnt out, and it took me 2 or 3 months to kind of get to the point where I had a plan for how to get myself out of that situation and out of that kind of dead feeling, if you like. And one of the aspects of that plan was to be my own boss again, and hopefully forever. And it's really important to me that I stay true to my sense of purpose and my values. And it's possibly overstating to say that sometimes when you're working for an organization, there are things that you are compromising on all the time, and generally those things don't matter. Because the central purpose of what you're doing or your work or your colleagues are enough to kind of keep you engaged. But I got to the point where I felt that there were things that I wanted to do in the way that I wanted to do them that other people might find odd or not be able to sort of put up with. And I didn't want to be stuck within a kind of organizational box. I wanted to have more freedom to make those choices for myself. And so that's when I decided to set up JHA Consulting. And at the same time, I decided to launch the Humans at Work podcast, kind of born from the same experience, if you like, of kind of burnout and trying to find a passion for work-related things that would take me out of that and sustain me in a way that the work that I'd been doing before hadn't. It had kind of drained me for a variety of reasons, even though, fascinating and, great work and great organizations. It's not a criticism, but it just wasn't working for me long term.
And so you mentioned compromising on your values as well when you're working with an organization. Is that part of what you help your clients with now?
Absolutely. I mean, I do one-to-one mentoring, I do leadership development for leadership teams, I do facilitation, and I do consulting. And what I try and do through all of that is be really clear with each individual that who they are as an individual is enough. They don't have to compromise who they are. They don't have to compromise all of their values and their purpose. What they need to do in a career context is understand what their purpose is within that context, and then stay true to that. That's different from being the same as everybody else. It's different from having the same kind of personality or the same sort of leadership style. So, leadership style is really, really important, but it has to hold true to your sense of purpose. And your purpose could be, I just want to go to work and come home to spend as much time as I can with my dogs or my kids. Work is just about making money for my life. Great. How are you going to put in place the conditions that enable you to do that the best? I would say that I support people to try and find a purpose that has a positive impact on either the environment or the organization or sort of society. That's one of my drivers. And so when I'm working with individuals or teams, I'm all about trying to get them to understand what is the impact of what they're doing, and can they be assured that that is a positive impact across one or more of those lenses. So that's one of the things that I would say is it's the well that you can draw from when things get hard, is that you understand the value that you will deliver because you're clear on your sense of purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you've briefly mentioned the Humans at Work podcast as well. How does that tie in with JHA Consulting?
I like to talk about them as sisters. They're sort of sister companies, if you like. I mean, Humans at Work has a global audience, and it's quite different in terms of how it works and what I do in Humans at Work. So Humans at Work, I host a podcast with guests from all around the world where I interview them about, what they were like as children, what their personalities are like, how their careers kind of waxed and waned. And we tend to end up with what they're doing now and what are the things that drive them, or what are the principles within their ethos. How does that apply to leadership or strategy, or their causes that they're focused on? They're celebrations of individuality and uniqueness, and they're also an inspiration. I find every single guest an inspiration in terms of something that they've done, how they talk about something, what they're doing now. And I wanted to share that with other people, because I think, it's quite a difficult time to live at the moment. There's all these polycrises around. There's inflation, there's war, there is climate change, there's biodiversity loss. Even within New Zealand, we've got the effects of Cyclone Gabrielle, we've got inflation, we've got all of these hugely systemic problems that are really, really difficult to get your head around and to deal with.
Yeah.
And it can leave you feeling very alone. And then you end up, having sort of periods of feeling down, feeling disconnected. So by listening to other people's stories and hearing, maybe they're not just the same as you, but maybe there's something about their story or how they approach situations that you can be inspired by. The Humans at Work platform is really about sharing inspiration and stories and creating that sense of community, that no one is alone anywhere in the world. And so with Humans at Work, we have learning courses that you can go and purchase, but we also have what's called the Human Hub, which is an online community. I write blogs on topics as wide ranging as they need to be, depending on what's happening in the world or what people are asking about in terms of support. And then we have these amazing guests who give so generously of their time and their thoughts.
And are those guests sort of from, leadership level down to people that are working in organizations, such as people that may be JHA consulting clients? Like, what kind of range of guests have you got?
Really wide range, actually. I mean, depending on the series, there tends to be a slight theme. But honestly, when I find somebody that's willing to do it, who, I fit them into the season regardless of the theme.
Yeah.
We've had people who lived through apartheid in South Africa and came out of it kind of changed in different sorts of ways. Somebody who worked alongside Nelson Mandela and learnt his leadership from Nelson Mandela, who that was an absolutely fascinating conversation, and we're scheduled to have a follow-up later in the year because I just didn't get to ask nearly enough questions about what that was like. A TV producer who produces outstanding award-winning serious documentaries, but also on the other side, he produces things like Survivor and MasterChef and those reality TV shows that some people might say is not sort of serious, but he talks really coherently about there being a similar driver behind both things. And then this season we focused a lot on coaches, so people who work alongside leaders, organizations, individuals, and who bring a different lens to how they coach. So performance or sports coaching, kindness mentoring, sort of strategy based coaching. And we've also had a real focus on sustainability. So I've been really, really lucky to have podcast conversations with people around the world who are kind of leading change makers in the world of sustainability and regeneration, just to understand how they're bringing all of their, career experience and personality to the challenge of environmental issues, and breaking it down and making it accessible for individuals with different business models. So you can learn a lot from just the variety of people.
Yeah.
And somebody described it, one of my guests described it as freestyling. So, I don't have set questions. I ask about their personal lives.
Yeah.
We go off on long tangents about, topics. And I share some of my, experience and, my personal stories as well. So it's more like listening to a long coffee conversation
Yeah.
than a work-related conversation. But there are always things that people can take away in terms of how you do your day-to-day job, how you find your sense of purpose, how leadership works, how strategy works, how to turn ADHD or other issues into superpowers. The range is really broad.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it definitely sounds like there's a bit of something for everyone. Awesome.
Definitely. And I struggle to stop recording them.
Yeah.
In the moment, I struggle. Like, I have a time limit because I'm taking up people's time, but also I struggle to do seasonal recording because I'm like, that person's happy to be on the podcast. I'll just squeeze another one in. So I have to be fairly disciplined because they're done, with people all around the world. Quite often I'm doing them in the evening or very, very early in the morning. So it works with their time zone, and on top of, full-time work and running two businesses. But I'm sort of addicted to talking to people and hearing their stories and being inspired.
Yeah. And so was the podcast inspired? I mean, you briefly touched on it when I asked about JHA. Is it inspired by the same things? Is it slightly more than that? Were there other things involved?
It's slightly more than that. I mean, I'm 47, and I got to a point where I thought I have some views on things, and I want to feel able to talk about them and share them and see if others want to talk and collaborate on those things. And it possibly sounds like stereotypical, but I wanted to have a voice. And I thought I probably waited long enough, at 47. I kind of feel like if I didn't do it now, I started it when I was 45, but now I'm 47, time moves on, sadly. I really wanted to be true to myself and to value my own voice. And so it started as an idea to do a blog, but almost immediately on the beach when I was having this thought, I decided that that's not conversational enough. It's too one way. It has to be dynamic. It has to be give and take. And so I'm a big fan of podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I get a lot of my ideas, a lot of my kind of sense of calm I get from listening to podcasts about a whole range of different topics. And I thought, well, if I enjoy them, then maybe I should try and host one, and I had a friend, an ex-colleague who hosts a very successful global podcast. And so I rang him up and I said, I'm thinking about doing a podcast. Help me. Like, I didn't know anything. I didn't know how it worked. And he spent half an hour on the phone saying, step by step, get a microphone, you need some music, you need to think about, are you going to have guests or are you just going to talk about stuff? All of this kind of thing. He really, really helped me. And I thought, well, I'll just do it. And it was in the middle of that burnout period. And it was the thing that got me out of bed. It interested me. There was enough of a spark of inspiration to do something. And that was really valuable for me because I realized that I actually wasn't dead inside. I had some passion still. So it kind of saved me from that,
So what advice then would you give to other business owners or entrepreneurs or leaders wanting to branch out and create that value and meaning in their work lives as well?
That's a really good question. I think there's a couple of things. One is, what are you waiting for? Like, I quite often talk, because I do a lot of work on decision making and leadership. And one of the things that I say to leaders is any non-decision is a decision in and of itself. So no action is a decision. Be really clear and make that decision really consciously. And so, if you find that life isn't enough, or you're looking forward and you don't understand what it is that you're going to achieve, or it holds no value for you, then now's that time to take a pause and think about, how are you going to find that sense of purpose? How are you going to assess, your contribution to whatever that might be, and then act on it. You've made that decision that currently things aren't good enough for you, and then you decide what you're going to do and you have to act on it. I think what happens for a lot of people is you get too busy, and you put all of those thoughts, the daydreams, you put them all aside. And then what happens is you wake up years later with regrets, and I never want to regret not doing something. I'd rather say, well, I gave it a go. I did my best. It didn't work out that well, but at least I know, than to go, I wish I'd have done that, because that drives you crazy later on in life, I think, So I would say you need to spend a little bit of time to find your purpose and then plan the next action. You don't need to have a full action plan, but what's the first thing you're going to do? Like for me, when I decided to set up the podcast, the first thing I did is I phoned a friend who said, this is what you have to do. And the next thing I did, I bought a microphone. And then I'm like, well, I'm a podcaster now. I've got a microphone. I must be all set up. Doesn't quite work like that. But the momentum got me going, and then it snowballed. So think about what you want to achieve and do one action, and then do the next action and the next action. It doesn't have to be this huge thing that turns your life upside down.
Yeah. And it is so common for business owners, leaders, even people in, in any role really, just that feeling so busy, like you mentioned, that you almost feel like you can't make that decision, but you have to be the first one to consciously make that decision and move forward with that before anything can change, right?
Definitely. You're the only one that can really control how you feel. Other people can sort of influence what you do and can pull on you in terms of duty or, responsibilities. But how you feel about your life is yours and yours alone. I think the other thing I'd say for business owners and leaders is that you're role modeling for other people. You might not think you are, but you really are. And when I work with leaders, one of the things that we often talk about is not filling all the space. So you're a leader because you have people who you lead. So one of the things that you can do is to get clear on your story or your value. Make sure that you're able to tell your team or your organization what that value is, and then let them move into the space that helps implement that. So often people are busy because they're leading, they're having the vision, they're making the decisions, and then they're doing the doing. And that leaves no room for people in the team or the organization to take ownership of that and to move into that space. It's very similar when you're having a conversation. If you jump in straight away every single time, other people don't have the opportunity to speak, and some people take a little bit longer to marshal their thoughts and get to the point where they're ready to speak. And that's something that I've worked on, because I'm a fast talker, fast thinker. I think as I speak, and I've had to learn, particularly when I'm with clients or mentoring or facilitating, is to put something out there and just wait. You have this long, uncomfortable silence or space. And then invariably what happens is people step into that space because you've made it for them. You've created that space. Very similar. If you don't create the space for your life, then there's nothing that can move into it.
Yeah, we've done a few episodes as well about empowering your team to do the doing as well. And there's a reason that you hired them in the first place too. So being conscious of that as well.
Absolutely. And, leadership doesn't have to be hierarchical. It
Mm,
can actually
no.
be about setting the vision and creating the conditions. And then you're just there as a coach,
Yeah.
as a mentor, as a sounding board. That's my style of leadership
Yeah.
that works best for me. And so, you always think your style work is the one that everybody should adopt. Um, and in different situations, you need a different leadership style, but you need to be conscious
Yeah.
that you're bringing that style to this context for this reason.
Hmm.
And that requires you to sort of assess who you are and the situation you're in and be conscious of your own behaviors, which again takes a little bit of pause.
Hmm. Yeah. And you also work with one of our virtual assistants at Strictly Savvy as well. So again, you are letting go of some more control and handing over some work to them. So how does that role of the virtual assistant fit in with your business operations?
Well, I have a wonderful virtual assistant who works across both of my organizations, both of my companies. And I would say, there are things that I am good at and there are things that I'm terrible at. And luckily for me, the things that I am terrible at are exactly the things that my virtual assistant loves and excels in. So
Mhm.
we have a very much a partnership relationship. Um, in terms of how that works, I believe that everybody who is part of the businesses that I run needs to understand and share some or all of the same principles. And so with the virtual assistant that I have, I talk a lot and we talk a lot about what are the next things for the company and why are we making these decisions. I absolutely bring all of my team, including the virtual assistant, into all of those kind of strategic level decisions so that they really understand the vision for the organization and they have the opportunity to say, I could do this, here's how I can help to deliver on that vision. So the core day-to-day things might stay the same, but the work around the edges can wax and wane depending on the strategy of both companies. And as we've developed a relationship and we've developed, more efficiency in our processes, then there's more opportunity and more time for some of those other things. And so the virtual assistant that I have has taken on many, many, many more responsibilities in all sorts of different areas than possibly they envisaged the first time we met. But I think of them as a fundamental part of my organizations, even though technically they work for you.
Yeah, no, that is our goal at Strictly Savvy as well, is to have our virtual assistant team be part of our clients' teams as well, because it doesn't have to just be a surface relationship. And like you say, if they understand the why behind the business as well, it empowers them to help you with more. And obviously, you're very busy with these two businesses. So the more that she can take off your plate, that's definitely the goal.
Definitely. And I mean, that they're a good sounding board as well, as well as a good reminder of, you said you wanted to do that thing and you haven't done it. And I'm like, oh, yes, you're right. But also, being a business owner can be a really lonely place.
Yeah.
I've cultivated relationships with other business owners so that I can have somebody to rant to, somebody to sort of sense check to, whatever. But I certainly would say that I use my virtual assistant for that as well. Like I've been thinking about doing this or this isn't working, it's just helpful to have somebody who's in your corner.
Yeah. Absolutely. And one of the things that a lot of people struggle with as well is the actual specific tasks that they can delegate to virtual assistants, because a lot of the perception, I guess, is that it's just general admin work. So would you mind talking us through some of the specific tasks that your virtual assistant's doing for you in the businesses?
Yeah. Okay. So let me do a little list here, because the list just gets longer and longer every year that we go through. So general admin, recording invoices. They work all the magic behind the Xero accounts. They set up payments in the company bank accounts. They're a conduit for the other service providers that I need to rely on. So accountant, lawyer, bookkeeper, IT company. Once you set up a company, you realize that you're not a single entity. You have all of these connections. They issue invoices. They work with clients on logistics. And then for humans at work, they review the transcripts from all of the podcasts. They review the graphics. And we have a wonderful graphic designer that does a graphical journey for every podcast. And they do the first QA of all of those things for me, so that by the time I get to see them or I'm asked for approval, most of the work is done. And helping with some of the behind the scenes website work, as well as general scheduling. Quite often I'll also ask for research on particular projects, and so they'll go off and do a research project and come back with a written summary or a download of everything that they've found out. The list is kind of endless, and I have to be fairly disciplined about saying, like, how much time and capacity do you really have in the next month, so that I can, schedule that in terms of those other projects. But, if I tried to unwind the virtual assistant from both businesses, it would be extremely difficult, because they're a fundamental part of how things run every day.
Yeah. And you do an amazing job of not just the textbook tasks, actually having those outside the box tasks and things that will genuinely help you, because otherwise you were going to have to do them yourself, like research. That's a great example. That's not something people would normally think of.
Absolutely. And I mean, I want work to be interesting and meaningful for everybody, and some of the tasks that I'm not good at, the reason I'm not good at them is that they're procedural, and they're the same every week or every month, and they're a little bit boring. And so I don't want anybody's life to be, doing things that they find boring. So understanding why those things are important and what might be different about the context. I talk a lot about the sort of commercial context every week, give an update on what's happening, what are we bidding for, what's happening with the contracts, what's happening with the clients, so that they really understand that, making that invoice work, or setting up that meeting, or doing that research is fundamentally part of what we're doing, and that brings more meaning. But also, I quite often say, would you be interested in doing this? Because, some people have particular areas that they're interested in. I don't think my virtual assistant has ever said no, because they're really keen to kind of learn and develop and just do different things. It adds a bit of complexity and interest to, everyday work and life.
And because you've done such a good job building that relationship with her, she, genuinely wants to be involved with any task she can help you with, really.
Absolutely. And I mean, she also helps me with the bed of life stuff. I try not to call on her for that. And she's always happy to help. But, she also knows almost everything that's going on with my life as well, because we are partners in the delivery of what's going on, as opposed to it being, sometimes I think people think virtual is kind of no face, no name, no contact. My experience is the thing that's virtual is we're physically not in the same location. But that's how I run my business anyway. We're 100% virtual. Both companies are 100% virtual. So it makes no difference to me at all that, you know, they're not physically in the same place as me.
Mm-hmm. What made you decide to start using a virtual assistant?
Well, you know, I set up these two businesses and I thought I could do everything on my own, as you always do, I think. And so I was getting up at 4 a.m. to learn how to do stuff myself and making an absolute pig's ear of it. And so after a few weeks of this, I thought, you know, there has got to be a better way. You know, I need to focus on the things that I need to focus on.
Yeah.
And so I did a little bit of research. I didn't want to employ somebody because I didn't know how much time, how much of their capacity I would need at that point. The businesses were still very new. But I'd heard of, you know, the virtual assistant movement, if you like.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's a way of having that help and support, but not having to guarantee, you know, a certain number of hours every week when I just had no idea what the work would be like. So the first thing I did is I got in contact with Strictly Savvy, and they took it from there basically. And actually what that did is it stimulated me to then say, well, I can't actually be my own IT tech either. And so then I engaged in a relationship with an IT company, and then an accountant and a lawyer.
Nice.
And then Strictly Savvy has also done and is continuing to do a lot of my creative work with my website and my monthly newsletter. So it sort of snowballed from there, and it you know, it's made the companies more than the sum of their parts, if that makes sense. You know, sometimes you think as a solopreneur, which I am with Humans at Work, you know, that it's not good enough, but actually you have this network of people in other organizations who are all there working for the same cause. You become more than just one person. You know, you've actually become a big collaboration that can do amazing things.
Yeah. Is that how you imagined it would go at the start when you engaged with a virtual assistant?
No, not really. I mean, I thought that it would help me with things like administrative tasks and paying my bills, to be honest, because those are the things that I'm just sort of, it's not my skill set, it's not my strength. Or I can do them, but I find it really difficult to get myself into that headspace, you know. So I thought it would be focused on that, and what it's turned out to be is a relationship that I really value, and, you know, a situation where they're kind of like, you know, a core member of the team for both companies. And the fact that they do administrative and financial tasks is just one part of the contribution. And I didn't think it would be like that.
Yeah. Well, it's also heartwarming for me to hear this as well, being one of our team. But unfortunately, our time has come to an end. So is there anything else that you wanted to add in terms of virtual assistants or JHA Consulting or Humans at Work?
Well, I guess what I would say about virtual assistants is if you've been battling alone or you've been thinking about it, then, as I said earlier, make the decision and act on it. And it's not so scary just to invite somebody into your working life to help with a few tasks. And once you've done that, you'll quickly see the value that they bring. I'm not a huge sales person, you know, in terms of the work that we do in both of the companies. That's not my personality. But I guess what I would say is that I try and be really true to the kind of moral courage code. And, you know, I would say that you can get a whole lot of inspiration from, you know, doing things differently and stepping outside your comfort zone. And if you need some inspiration or some help in any of those things, then one of the two companies or both could be one of the places that you get that from.
Yeah, Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. And for our listeners, if you would like to find out more about Jules and her amazing businesses, you can head over to jhaconsulting.org or humansatwork.org. Or since you're already likely in a podcast platform right now listening to this, you could also go and search for the Humans at Work podcast. And thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate, to review, and subscribe to the Get Savvy podcast.